Video. Reframing a problem or looking at it a different way can help us find better solutions. Welcome to ReFrame, a monthly live series that tells amazing stories about amazing women in wealth management and tackles the issues that we face. I am your host this month, Ana Trujillo Limon, and I am coming to you live from our Excell conference in Orlando, Florida. Well, rainy Orlando, normally sunny Orlando. And I am so excited to be with one of my new favorite colleagues, Dr. Lisa Toppin. Dr. Toppin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So good to be with you.
So, Dr. Toppin, you are our new VP of Workforce Development and Expansion. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
It's a long title. It's a good one. You can do big things with that big title, right?
That's it. That is the intent.
Love it. Okay, so I always like to start with people's journey. So tell me, what did you want to be when you were a little girl growing up? And how did you come to be the VP of Workforce Development and Expansion?
Well, thank you. And so what's interesting is I had no idea. I was one of those people that showed up at university and I just picked a major to pick something to get started. There's a longer story about that later, but it turned out to be fruitful in terms of getting to what I was intended to do. And so I have finally found a career in human resources, which led me to work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've had the opportunity to do that at a few different firms. And so I'm now fortunate to join you here at Carson Group to lead workforce and market expansion. And so that's sort of the nutshell of that journey.
No, we'll dive deeper when you're on an episode of Framework, right, into your background.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yesterday we were a part of a presentation given by our very own Dr. Julie. Dr. Julie has headed up the Women in Wealth Management research for the past few years, and there were 26 people in the room, I think we counted, right? So let's talk from that perspective. Why is it important that we have efforts to increase workforce expansion, much like we're doing here at Carson?
Well, I think, for everyone, and we've heard that theme sort of pop up in the conference as well, is this the whole idea of talent and the idea that if we're not leveraging the breadth of talent of women in our country and who could potentially be in our profession, then we've not gotten the very best of what could be. And so we have appreciation for the fact that women appreciate the opportunity to work with other women and support them. There's an understanding that certainly they bring. And so I think that it's important that we continue to work on how we expand that and offer that as we look at ways in serving the country.
Absolutely. And there were a few gentlemen in the session yesterday, but one of them who said that, that a lot of his male clients actually prefer to work with female advisors. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And then I think that you would find the reverse to be true as well. The idea is to have a diversity of people that clients have the choice of working with. And so that's really the effort and the push.
For sure. So shifting a little bit to talking about, a lot of companies these days, we're seeing in the news that a lot of companies are, divesting from their DEI programming and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about, in previous roles, you've led DEI strategies and things like that. Why is it important that companies invest, especially in times in the climate that we're in now, where people are starting to divest from it?
Yeah, well, I think every company has their specific reasons of why they are, let's say, pushing away. But for those who are really being thoughtful about the evolution of our country and who's in it and how you will be competitive for talent ongoing, I think those companies are positioned to really, I'm going to say, reap the reward of holding firm in terms of trying to build a very diverse, inclusive workforce. That people like to engage and see that there are people that look like them who've already traversed some of the things they're interested in traversing. So if I show up at your firm and I don't see anybody that looks like me, I might think twice, because there's another firm over there who's just as interesting and just as competitive, where I do see a variety of people. And so that might be a better fit. So I think we've got to open the aperture for who we're considering and who we are developing and including in our spaces. And I think that's just got to be a paramount if we're going to be competitive as time rolls on.
For sure. And even with the shifting demographics, that was something we chatted about yesterday after our session. That whole notion of, well, where are you going to get the talent from then?
That's it.
You're
That's
not
it.
having
I mean,
the space.
that piece is just true.
Mhm.
And the talent is shifting and continues to shift. And we've got to open it up so that everybody's included. So you really can't get the best of the best.
Mhm. For sure. So the math needs to start mathing there, right?
The math needs to start mathing. I love it.
I always like a good math joke.
Yeah, yeah.
So we had a great meeting the other day talking about our upcoming State of Women in Wealth Management research. It's that time of year. Again, we're starting to talk about the survey and figuring out what types of things we want to benchmark and what types of new questions we want to tackle. So I know you're going to be a huge part of that project this year. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of your goals and your visions and things you want to get accomplished with that research.
Yeah. Well, I just have to start by saying I am so impressed and honored and appreciative of what Dr. Julie has already given us as a place to launch from. And I know that she'll continue to be engaged and support as we build this out. But I think one of the things that we can continue to pull the thread on, and she talked a little bit about this yesterday, was the intersectionality of women in this business, and the fact that there weren't enough in the initial data set to present a statistically significant answer for some of those questions. So we'll have to look at it or approach it a little bit differently, leverage some qualitative research and methods that might let us get to some answers, because it's going to be important to really understand how women with different backgrounds are experiencing this. We're not one monolithic group. We really do have different experiences, and it's important to understand those if we're going to really make significant progress.
For sure. And yesterday, Dr. Julie was talking a little bit about how we've gotten very good at identifying the problem, right? And somebody in the audience asked a very good question about, like, well, what is the goal of this research overall? And so we kind of started riffing about people using it and the implications of the research to create more inclusive firms, I guess. So let's talk a little bit about, the research as you know it and the research as we're going to design it moving forward. What are you hoping advisors take away from it, and how can they use it in their firms to build more inclusive cultures for women?
Well, and I love that you're referencing that conversation that Dr. Julie led yesterday, because one of the moment you're talking about important implication around understanding that women are less sponsored, more mentored, less sponsored than their male counterparts. And there is still a queen bee syndrome that shows up. And that's sort of the idea that there could really only be one. And so women are not necessarily in position to support each other, but the one emerges and everybody else is sort of either tearing her down or certainly not supporting. So when just the conversation yesterday, it was clear that people in the room had experienced that. Mm-hmm. So the power of that is when you name a thing, it becomes real, and you understand it not just as something that's happened to you individually, but that it is a phenomena that exists and that others have experienced it. You're not alone. And so collectively, we can start to lean in and say, well, now how can we solve for this, right? We know that this happens. How can we be better about it? And I think the comment in the room was, listen, once you see that, you can't unsee it. So now we got to lean in and start to change it in a way that that would make a difference for the folks in the room. So I'm hoping that those are the kind of takeaways that people will get from the research that exists, and that we'll continue to do research that, again, lends itself to those kinds of insights that not only affirm what people have experienced, but then empower them to help each other and build women advisors.
Yeah, I think Samantha Allen had a moment it was a really great moment where she she was very vulnerable on LinkedIn, talking about being a working mom and how difficult that was, and how so many people reached out to her, right? So it's like identifying these problems in the research. We have been able to be in community with other women who are experiencing similar things. And even though it's never fun to experience the queen bee syndrome or anything like that, it's always, okay, oh, that happened to me. Oh, and we share these stories and build better bonds with each other, which I believe anecdotally leads to better retention in the industry, the building community.
For sure. And you understand it differently because it's not personal. Now it's a phenomena that shows up. And so now you can understand it in the context of something that happens to people in that particular situation. So it's not you, it's the situation. So how do we move forward from that? So yes, I thought that was a great story that Sam shared. Very vulnerable, but really sort of underscored this whole idea that when we share ourselves with each other, there is power, and people respond to that level of authenticity and honesty, and the fact that we're so many of us are going through the same thing. So.
And it kind of speaks to, I don't know if you were in Liz Bohannon's keynote speech this morning at Excell. We had Liz Bohannon who gave a great talk, and she had us do an exercise where we wrote down something that we would be ashamed to tell people, that we might think it would take away from our business or take away from our credibility, and then had us pass it around. And so the papers got passed around to a point where you don't know where your paper ended up. And then we read them. Well, we read one out loud, and the message was, when you share it, you share the burden, and it kind of lifts it from you. So I just love how everything is tying together here at Excell and all of the different sessions.
That was powerful. That was powerful. Just in terms of an exercise and a demonstration of how everybody is carrying a burden. And when you write it down and you share it in the community in a way that isn't vulnerable, right? Because you don't know who ended up with your written piece of paper. When it is said out loud, how many people stood up to say, not only would I not judge that, I would be leaning in to offer support. And so whoever's paper that was, they got to see an entire room standing saying, I would support you if given the opportunity. I thought it was remarkable what she did.
Absolutely. A lot of really great moments. Like, again, going back to our session yesterday, was Dr. Julie's session, but we were all there in support. There was a gentleman in the room who talked about vulnerably that his firm had, a female advisor had been hired and had left because of all of the problems we identified in the research. And it pushed him to do better, to examine, what am I going to do moving forward to make it better? So let's talk a little bit about that, and kind of how this research could be used by the male firm owners and other allies in the industry to make better firms.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, I think that is really the power of solving problems for the people who have been excluded. When they created cutouts in the sidewalks, they weren't doing that for able-bodied people. But all of us who are I'll say many of us who are able-bodied leverage those cutouts for bicycles and strollers, but that wasn't the intended audience. But they made it better for everybody. And that's typically what happens when you build a more inclusive environment. So many more people take advantage of the enhancements that you've made that just make it so that other people are included. So as he talked about the impact on his firm of maybe not having the most inclusive culture, and the impact of that, the tearing apart of the team and people going in different directions, it just sort of underscored this idea that, gosh, if we can find a way to make it so that everybody can be successful, the chances of us not only staying together but lifting each other and pushing forward is really there for the taking. So I appreciated so much his comments and reflections in the room. I thought that was really helpful.
Absolutely. And one other tie-in, so Liz Bohannon also was talking about bringing big dream energy to small dreams. And that kind of reminded me of there was a moment, again, where another participant stood up and was like, we've been talking about this for 30 years. And for 30 years, we need to change now. We need to do something now. And Dr. Julie made a statement of, like, if I look at the macro view, I get so discouraged that I don't want to go on. But so I look at the micro view and I get inspired to go on. And so it ties into what Liz said. It's like, what are some micro views or micro things we could do to start making a difference on the macro level when it comes to not just women in wealth management, but other types of diversity and inclusion in our industry?
Well, I like the idea of this because we don't experience the world always on a macro.
Right.
we're in a room,
Mhm.
right? And we're not, I don't know, we're not in Sweden right now. We're here, right? So it's not necessarily the world that is impacting our experience right now in this moment. It is where we are. And so, sort of pulling that thread, the idea that it matters on the micro level, it does. It matters what we create in our company. It matters what happens in a particular firm, or how you show up with clients, and how you're inclusive. Because in that moment, what matters is the people in that room. So I thought I think that's a great tie-in that you sort of drew there, and I think it's an important one when I think of building inclusion, it really is about sort of making it so that we are all getting better at it, so that whatever room we're showing up in, we're getting better.
Yeah.
Just getting better.
Mhm.
And there's no perfection. You'll never have it completely licked, because we continue to evolve and learn and change. But you get better, you get practiced, and that's the piece I think that matters so much.
For sure. So let's shift a little bit. I got very geeked up when they hired you, and even more so when we got to talk for the first and second and third times. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. I have, as anybody who knows me and has worked with me knows, that this is a big passion area of mine. And so this is the first role of its type here at Carson. And we have a big network of partners of all types of advisors we work with. So let's talk a little bit about your plan to kind of engage advisors to start their own type of DEI programs, or let's talk a little bit about that, like engaging the entire network, getting back on that macro level.
Sure. Well, I think that the first thing is to sort of establish what I'm going to call an operating philosophy about how to think about this work. And the way I talk about it, sort of and I use a sports analogy, so forgive me. But the way I talk about it is, this is a leadership practice. So if you are building your leadership in whatever capacity, then building inclusion is a part of that practice. Now, the idea that we're all entering practice at the same level, at the same pace, we're not. So if we're both entering the yoga class, and you've been practicing yoga for 15 years and I'm new, you may be able to take your foot over your head and stand on one foot and do like this, right? With the 1 foot, the yoga pose, we know that pose. I may be trying not to fall out a tree, right? Which is actually an accurate thing. Sorry. Yeah. But anyway, so our practice is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same. We're not starting in the same place. We're not going to do the same thing. When the instructor says take a vinyasa, I may go down, I may not. I don't, depending upon the day and how my knees are doing. So we're practicing always, but we've got to practice with what is right for us and where we are. And I think that's the same is true about inclusion. If you grew up in one community where it's completely multicultural, you've got a different practice than somebody who grew up somewhere else. And so how do we have patience and grace and appreciation for where each person is entering?
Yep.
And we get it wrong. So grace and patience for that too.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about your title, Workforce Development and Expansion, and why that title versus like a DEI title. Why is that important?
Well, I think what's important is, and we appreciate that sort of the world is shifting. And I think that the DEI language is brings with it some tags that maybe aren't so helpful, because really the essence of what it is we are trying to do, what we're focused on, is what we recognize is we need a breadth of talent to attract to our organization. And so that's workforce expansion. That's what we're gonna do. It doesn't have to be called diversity. That might be the outcome, but the action is workforce expansion. And the same is true for marketplace. We're trying to expand our presence in the market. We want to create the space that Carson is the best place for women advisors, and that is broadly all women advisors. And so we're going to expand, and we're going to build to become that. And so that we're really talking about what it is and the action that we're taking, and appreciate that, the language is important.
I love that. And it's more appealing in a way for I think a lot of people in the industry. So let's talk a little bit about, you said earlier, we're all on our different journeys, right? Some of us are falling out of tree pose, which is me and you both apparently.
Right.
And other people are advanced. What is your advice more broadly to advisors and firm owners in the industry who want to expand their workforce and want to reach more different types of talent from different places and spaces?
I think let's talk. I think that the opportunity to garner the kind of talent you're looking for is there, and it will take some creative solutions. It's not a one size fits all. I don't think there's anything that we do that necessarily comes in that bucket, but I do think that we can be helpful to you in terms of what it might look like for your particular needs and how you might approach that. So that's, I wouldn't give a blanket answer. I would just say that we're happy to help as you think about the ways in which you'd like to expand.
Wonderful. Just another way the Carson community can really help you grow and expand your firm and your workforce both. So now that you're here at Carson, you've settled in, you've been here how long now?
I think it's been 6 weeks.
6 weeks. So what are you most excited about and geeked up about for your role here?
Yeah. Well, the one thing that is really important for this kind of work is who the leaders are. And I know Bert White from our time at LPL, and I know Heather Carter from our time at LPL. And these are leaders who I believe in, and I know believe in the idea of workforce and market expansion. So, you know, when Heather called, that was easy. It was an easy yes, because I know that there will be the support to do the work that we're talking about doing, and it's not going to be easy. This work never is, but what is really critical is the leadership and how what the support for doing the work looks like. And we'll have to figure that out in the context. I'm still listening, you know, not having been here very long, but I do know who these folks are at the core, and I know that there'll be support to do the work, and that they're asking me to come and do the work is because they want the work done. So I'm excited to do it and excited to dive in.
And I know a lot of people are excited about having this support behind it. And I know I've been part of our multicultural research group. We're small but mighty, and so we in particular, all three of us, we're very excited that you are here. And so you've come on, you've seen that we have an idea council and some resource groups. Let's talk a little bit about kind of your next steps with those types of things that we already kind of have little bits in place, but we're really excited for the future and how we're going to make those more formal. And
right. Well, we're doing some work now. We joined the idea council, and we sort of set out a path for the balance of the year. So we're going to do some training. We've already done one training on psychological safety, and we'll do a few others before the year is over. But then we're also doing some projects, some subgroup work on how to think about how we'd like to structure going forward. Pardon me. And I think that will really position us well to start 2025 with you know, like a fresh platform of what we'd like it to be and what makes sense in the context of this organization. So we're getting our hands in it right now. So we'll see what emerges, but I think it'll be helpful to have to leverage what I'm going to call my bank of good practice in industry in the context of Carson and what would make sense here.
And I just wanted to give a special shout out to Tamsin Butler. So Tamsin runs our Veterans Resource Group, and she's one of on my team. We are on the same team, and she's just so incredible. And so the Veterans Resource Group is kind of like a template. Everybody wants to be like them, right?
They are. She is incredible, and so I just appreciate so much having a great conversation with her. And she's speedy. I mean, just in terms of getting things done, we had one conversation, and then the next conversation was, "Yep, I arranged for the parking," or something that she was working on in terms of supporting veterans. So yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. So you've been a speaker and a consultant and a trainer on these topics for a long time. What are some common themes that have come up that you usually speak on and would like to share with our listeners?
Well, I think we talked as I alluded to, we talked about psychological safety. I talk a lot about followership because it really is, when you start to understand the concepts of followership, they really do apply to whatever role you're in. We're all following and having others follow us. And so understanding what that is and your opportunity to shape it really allows for greater inclusion in whatever aspect of your life you want to apply it. I mean, I apply the model of followership to parenting and to being a wife and a friend and a sister and every aspect, every role. And so I think that's an important aspect of inclusion. I think one of the things that I love leveraging in the space of diversity and inclusion, which doesn't always get leveraged that way, but is quite powerful, is this whole idea of strengths. I use the Gallup Strengths Finder tool, and what that does is it helps people understand their complement of strengths. But what it facilitates is, when I understand my strengths and I have appreciation for who I am, by definition, it facilitates my appreciation for who you are. So then we start to transcend the things that keep us apart. And we start to understand why I might need you, because you've got some strengths that I don't have. And that this is where 1 + 1, or as Gallup would say, the power of 2, but 1 + 1 might actually equal 3. And so I love bringing that as a tool to sort of facilitate this idea of how do we get to see each other in a different context, in the most powerful context, and that is in the idea of what we actually bring to the workplace.
I think those are so powerful, those types of assessments and strengths. Like, well, I haven't done Strengths Finder in particular, but as part of the Latino Leadership Institute, we did Insights Discovery, and it was really neat they showed us how we interact with other, well, it's like colors and how I lead with green, and so my sister leads with red. And so we found out we're actually like perfect complements to each other. And so it's also really helpful in working relationships. Like, when you think somebody's rude or dismissive, or they're being, exclusive of me, or sometimes, and you're like, oh no, that's just kind of their disc. That's their profile. They like it short and to the point. And so that's really helpful.
That is helpful. And the way you just described it was going from judgment, like, I don't think they like me, to, oh no, that's the removal of the judgment, and therefore the appreciation, right? And that's the piece that we want to get out of the way, is the judgment, because the judgment, the lack of judgment allows for the appreciation. Appreciation, we can do anything. So I mean, that's a perfect example.
And being here, I'm a remote employee, as are you, right? So being here in person with all of our colleagues it's really exciting to kind of, I feel like in a remote environment, sometimes there are misunderstandings, or I don't know about this person, or they don't know about me, but then you get together and you're like, oh, we're all okay. Right. So let's talk a little bit about inclusion in the remote environment, or hybrid companies like ours, where how can you be more inclusive of remote employees and make them feel more part of the team?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a great question. I think a lot of companies are struggling with how to do that well. And what I would say is what I would put on the table is to think about it in terms of a relationship, and that it's an exchange. So there are some things that the company will do, but then it's also incumbent on me as the remote employee to reach out, to connect, to show up when I can, because it really is a two-way street in terms of how that gets experienced. And I think we're exploring ways in which that will work at Carson, as we're starting to embrace more and more employees working remotely.
Yeah, so it is true, because sometimes, I'm very introverted, and I'm like tempted. Oh, I just want to call it a night, but it's like, no, let's go. You're never with everybody. Let's go and be sure. So yeah, as a remote employee, definitely put in the work. It's worth it. Right?
It's worth it. It really is, because I know with me, folks who know me well know that I lead with a lot of humor. It just pops in my head, and I just say it. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's not so funny. But if you know me well, you'll read it. You'll even at a distance, you'll read the humor. But if you don't know me well, you might not. And therein lies a potential misunderstanding. So you have to spend time. There's no other way to hurdle it other than spending time.
Yeah.
And 3D time. as it were. We got to be in relationship and in the room with each other, and then we can go away and have that context to continue to interact.
And that's why it's so important to attend events like this and build community with other people in the industry. Well, Dr. Lisa, this has been so much fun chatting with you. And I always like to ask a few questions at the end. And the first of which is there anything I didn't ask that you would like to include or like to share with our listeners?
Oh, wow. It was a great conversation, and you as a great journalist, I think you hit all the marks. So I can't think of anything else I would add at this juncture.
That's the highest compliment. And the last is what do you wish people would reframe their thinking on when it comes to workforce expansion and development?
Oh, I think it is opening up with the idea that one, we're all in practice. Everybody's in different stages of their practice. And so allowing people to be in practice and giving them room to get it wrong sometimes. I've pronounced your name wrong a couple of times. You showed grace on me for that. And so how do we give each other that room so that we can stay in conversation? Because if you make me wrong a lot, I'm just going to avoid the conversation because I don't want to be wrong and I don't want to insult you and I don't want to be in the bad space. So let's just not talk. And so I'll just avoid you.
Yeah.
And see, then we've shut it down. We don't want to shut it down. We want to open it up. So if we can really give each other room for the conversation, to disagree, to get it wrong, to grow, to learn, we're going to do amazing work together.
Yes, we are. Well, Dr. Lisa, you're tagged in our LinkedIn post for sure, but what is the best way for people to find you, connect with you other than LinkedIn?
Now you got me. Okay. I'm
LinkedIn's
mostly on LinkedIn. Okay. Dr. Lisa Toppin now. I am trying. I'm coming along, but I'm not there yet on my Instagram. So that's going to be a goal for probably 2025.
And you have a great website too.
I do have
wonderful blog posts.
Thank you.
I was talking you.
Yeah, that's right. So see, I'm trying. I am trying. But now you absolutely can check out my website and sort of see some of the blogs and podcasts and things I've done historically for sure. And there'll be more coming from that perspective, but probably I'm most active on LinkedIn. But my Instagram is coming. You've heard it here. It's out there, but I haven't been so active, but I'm coming. I promise.
Okay. Well, you all heard it here on ReFrame. Dr. Lisa's Instagram is coming. And thank you so much again for sharing some time with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And thank the rest of you for tuning in to this episode of ReFrame. Please like Carson Group and Carson Coaching so you don't miss next month's.